Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Ibu Stella Christie, Vice Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology in Indonesia, and Ms. Gabriela Ramos, Co-Chair of the Task Force on Inequality and Social-Related Financial Disclosures. Please join me in giving a warm round of applause. Welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, Excellencies, distinguished guests, and colleagues. Welcome to the CSIS Digital Tech Lecture Series titled AI Governance for the Greater Good, Balancing Innovation and Ethics. My name is Nadia Daulay, and I am honored to be your host for today's event. Before we begin, I would like to warmly welcome some of our key stakeholders joining us today. Welcome Bapak Djisman Simandjuntak, Chair of the Board of Directors of the CSIS Indonesia Foundation, Ibu Natalia Subagio, Member, Board of Directors, Bapak Yose Rizal Damuri, Executive Director of CSIS, Ibu Medellina Henditio, Deputy Executive Director of CSIS, Bapak Yusuf Wanandi, Vice Chair, Board of Trustees, and our speakers for today, Ibu Stella Christie, Vice Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology in Indonesia, and Ms. Gabriela Ramos, Co-Chair of the Task Force on Inequality and Social-Related Financial Disclosures. The program for this session will be held in 4 parts. We will start by an opening by Bapak Yose Rizal Damuri, followed by a keynote lecture from Ms. Gabriela Ramos on the ethics of AI governance, which will be followed by into a panel discussion with our experts, an open Q&A session, and finally a photo session to commemorate our gathering today. I would now like to invite Bapak Yose Rizal Damuri to the podium to deliver the opening remarks and lead us into the session. Pak Yose, the floor is yours.
Very good morning to you all, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to welcome you all to CSIS Digital Tech Lecture Series and to open these important discussions and lecture on AI governance. Special welcome to our speakers of today, Ms. Gabriela Ramos, currently the co-chair of Task Force on Inequality and Social-Related Financial Disclosure, but just until recently also Assistant DG of UNESCO. Also to Excellency Ibu Professor Stella Christie, Vice Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, Republic of Indonesia. Of course, also a special welcome to Bapak Professor Djisman S, Chair of Board of Directors, CSIS Foundations, who will also lead the discussion today. And of course, to our founders, Pak Yusuf, Ibu Clara, as well as all of you who already spare your time to participate in our discussion today. Well, I think almost everybody in these rooms has been using artificial intelligence in one way or another. I think most of us also find it useful. And in fact, I also myself have been using AI for at least 1 year or even more. Yeah? And I find it really useful actually. To use AI in my work as a researcher, as the director of CSIS, as well as to do even some kind of daily routine. In fact, I asked AI actually to find some informations that I can use for the opening remarks of our discussion today. So there are a lot of interesting facts actually. Like for example, this is what I get from AI actually. There is the so-called Stanford AI index just recently released for 2026, and it says that generative AI actually already reached 53% of populations adoptions within 3 years of the use. So it's faster than the personal computer adoptions or the internet adoptions over the comparable periods of 3 years. And in many developing countries, actually the adoption even higher than that, reaching 60%, 70% of the internet user. And also according to that survey, many of the users actually find the AI adoptions, AI use is very useful for them. Like for examples, on the surveyed organizations, 70% of organizations using AI in 2025 have find it quite useful in productive and increased productivity gains of around 14 to 15%, 26% in software development, and even increased productivity in marketing output by 50%, according to some studies. So again, in short, we have seen the use of AI and find it very useful and beneficial to us. But of course, this kind of situation, very rapid adoptions, also make us very nervous, basically. On one hand, we feel the benefit, but on the other hand, we are also quite nervous with this kind of speedy, very fast adoptions. And in fact, there are quite many reports that say you can say the dark side of the artificial intelligence, the misuse of artificial intelligence. Like for example, in the United States, the Federal Communication Commissions issued $6 million fine over illegal election interference that use deepfake AI-generated voice. It's not only about elections, not only about political activities in trade and in also financials. We also have seen a lot of issues with the use of AI. In Indonesia, our own experience also shows that the risk of AI, the risk of misuse of AI is increasing actually. At CSIS, in the last 3 years, we have the specific programs we call Safer Internet Lab that is trying to promote a better use of internet, a safer use of internet, including also other digital technology, such as artificial intelligence. And in 2024, we had a survey and found that 72% of Indonesians actually had seen AI-generated image during our election campaign in 2024. And many of them actually still believe that this fake video, fake images that at that time were distributed quite rapidly, were distributed very rapidly, also quite true. And so at least 1/3 of our respondents believe that they are true. They are not really a fake video or fake image. And so this kind of things have bring us to the realizations of the risk of AI is there in Indonesia as well. And we have to do something about it. It's not only about elections. We also have seen the use of AI or the misuse of AI in various other activities, including financial scams and frauds. and it's quite rampant in Indonesia and also Southeast Asia. But of course, despite all of these problems, we cannot respond to the risk of AI simply by scrapping the technology, because AI is actually also proving to be a powerful tool for development when it is used responsibly. World Bank report, for example, argues that developing countries can benefit most when they invest in the foundations of AI adoption, such as connectivity, computer facilities, context, and competency, including also the development of digital skills. That's why AI governance is very important. AI governance, as we will discuss later, should not be framed as a choice between innovation and ethics. Good governance, actually, what makes the sustainable innovations possible. It creates a good ecosystems that makes innovations remain to be developed in the future. So around the world, I think the policy landscape is actually moving toward that directions, including also by having in the UN several initiatives under the UN, including also the UNESCO recommendations on the ethics of artificial intelligence. And we are quite fortunate today to have Ms. Gabriela Ramos, who actually oversees the developments of UNESCO's recommendations on the ethics of artificial intelligence in 2021, even several years before we were surprised by the developments of ChatGPT in 2023 or 2022. So Ms. Ramos also is in charge for readiness assessment methodology, or RIM, which Indonesia took this assessment in 2024. We also are quite fortunate to have Ibu Professor Stella Christie, the Vice Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology, who is also a renowned expert on cognitive development and intelligence. I believe Bu Stella also will provide us with a lot of examples on the developments of this artificial intelligence. And of course, those two renowned speakers will bring us a better understanding on how we should govern our AI in our country. I would like to express also my appreciations to our partners, Indonesia FinTech Society, which is pretty much very close to AI development and digital technology, which is I'm also part of this Indonesia FinTech Society, one of the founder and member of steering committee, and also to our partner Indonesia Artificial Intelligence Society for both of their support. CSIS has been following this digital issue in Indonesia and Southeast Asia for the last 10 years, I think, or more. And this digital tech lecture series hopefully would bring a better understanding on various related issues and help move us beyond just slogans into harder but necessary work for building AI governance in Indonesia, which is very necessary, in my opinion, for our development and also to realize our aspirations to become Indonesia Emas in 2045. So again, thank you very much for your participation and enjoy the lecture today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pa Yose, for your insightful opening remarks. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to invite Ms. Gabriela Ramos to the podium. For a short introduction, Ms. Ramos is a distinguished global leader in multilateral policy, having held senior roles at UNESCO, the OECD, and the G20. She is currently the co-chair of the Task Force on Inequality and Social-Related Financial Disclosures, where she is leading the development of a framework for a financial transparency and social impact. Notably, she is the architect of UNESCO's 2021 Global Standard on the Ethical Governance of Artificial Intelligence, a landmark agreement signed by 194 countries. As a dedicated economist and diplomat, she has been a tireless advocate for inclusive growth and gender equality, earning distinctions from Forbes and being decorated with the Ordre National du Mérite by France. Please join me in a warm welcome of round of applause as she delivers the lecture today.
Thank you so much, and it's really a pleasure to be here in Indonesia. Thank you so much, Director General. I'm so honored to have all the powers that be of this fantastic center, and also the Deputy Minister. Indonesia has been always very close to my heart. When I was at the OECD, we really worked very hard to get Indonesia closer to this institution because we understood how important the country is for the international economy. And thank you for the Mexican delegation to be here also. And then at the OECD, at UNESCO, Indonesia was one of the very first countries that did the readiness assessment, as Director Yose has just mentioned. So it's great to be here. So thank you so much for inviting me. And I have to say that it was very well framed in your introductory remarks, because the whole question is how much we wonder for these technologies. We are in awe in terms of the capacities, in terms of the impact, in terms of the promise that they bring to humanity to address many of the challenges that we confront. But on the other hand, also the challenges that we are looking into it. So I'm gonna take you through the journey that led us at OECD, but also at UNESCO, to try to organize this discussion at the international level, because the technologies are global, therefore needs to be global discussions and global rules. But also, how do I see that the conversation is changing? Not only because of generative AI and because of the fact that we are now perceiving that these technologies are getting more and more capacities, more autonomous, more pervasive, more impactful, and therefore, who is to decide how do we shape the technological trajectory? And I think this is the question that we have now. So where are we now? It's just amazing, and your Deputy Minister is a cognitive scientist. What is amazing is how much these technologies are resembling the cognitive capacities of humans. And that's what makes them so impressive, because all of the other technologies have to do with things that were done. Automobiles could run, planes can fly, but nobody was resembling what we do, which is thinking, which is reasoning, which is analyzing, and therefore this is just amazing. And therefore, what happens is that we are at awe from the trajectory that these technologies have had in the last 10 years, starting with the statistical models that were just as good as they get because we continue using them, to machine learning, which was the breakthrough in terms of how much we could train machines to take decisions, to recognize patterns, to understand relationships between things, to synthesize. And as I said, this is as good as it gets because it continues also to be there. There are technologies that might be surpassing each edition, but the previous one is still there and is still being used. The kind of discussions we have with machine learning, whenever the machine was coming out with an outcome, and that many times we didn't know what happened and why did they decide what they decided. Even there, which is the most basic kind of developments. Neural networks was the most impressive development because it just expanded the kind of tasks, cognitive tasks, that the technologies can perform. But then all of these condensed in the generative AI. And generative AI was a wake-up call because it was rushed to the market. It was a huge technological breakthrough that was not tested for safety. And it was rushed to the market. And suddenly all of us were just there admiring the capacities of the technologies, not only to discover patterns, not only to find the links between different elements when you pose the questions, but actually able to reason, able to interact, which is what makes them different. It's a conversational tool, and yes, it recognizes words, because that's exactly what it does. It predicts what's the next word that is going to come in the conversation, but at the end, it was interacting, what made it so impressively interesting. Not great, because many times the anthropomorphization of these technologies might also get into very dangerous places, and we have seen how people are using these technologies as therapeutes, as doctors, as advisors, as girlfriends, as boyfriends. I mean, it's really a very, very complex issue. And now we are with the agentic AI. And this is just amazing, because if you think that you can ask these machines to perform tasks autonomously and to take decisions by themselves at every step of the way, becoming your doctor, becoming your accountant, becoming your lawyer, and they can take these decisions. So this is just impressive. And as you can see here, is also the pervasiveness, because just 210 million using Gen AI in very short time. It's also the fast way in which it is reaching so many people around the world. And the other fact is that it's also not stopping there. Now we have mythos. Now we have, I mean, it's every time we're just trying to catch up what is happening. And at the OECD, I remember we did this report trying to also compare the different trajectories of different technological breakthroughs. Telephony took 25 years to reach 25% of the US population. 25 years. It's just, and if you think about electricity, I think it was 50 years. You think about television, it was 15 years. So we were always in the span of more than 10 years for 25% of the population. The iPhone took 4 years. But if you think about the iPhone, it's not the same iPhone that we had 10 years ago. What we have now is just a scale of 10 in terms of their own capacities, because it includes artificial intelligence. So again, what happens is that these technologies rush to the market, are decided by the developers, and is very pervasive and very fast. And we know that policymakers, regulators are always behind the markets. It's not the very first time that we will be behind the markets. We were behind the markets during the financial crisis, but it's also, in this case, it's just very, very, very fast. The other part of the history is the massive concentrating race of the billions, and this is the other thing that is so, we don't even understand when you think that NVIDIA has 4 trillion capitalization. 4 trillion is just, what is the size of Indonesian or Mexican economy? Might be around, which is just huge. We don't even think about, but if you have a company that can have 4 trillion capitalization, what is the political power that they also have? We don't think about these consequences, but also this, look at it. It's amazing when we hear the notion that the US is competing neck to China. Look at this. It's 20 times what the US investing regarding China. The only point is that China's capabilities are also very advanced. And China now is doing 3 times the research in these issues than the US. So the fact is that they're investing in the things that might lead to be really neck to neck, but not yet there. The question here is also that 80% of frontier models come for fewer than 10 labs. And the 10 labs are usually in the countries that you know. It's the US, the UK. I was looking at the Stanford review, Stanford report that is the best report every year that captures all of the trends. And they said, yes, we have the US, China, maybe the UK, developing the frontier model, the large frontier model. But the US is doing 20 times what China is doing, and is doing 40 times what the UK is doing. So this is the ecosystem that tells you also about the political power that some countries and companies have. I don't want to get only into the negatives. Of course, we get into the negative impact because that's the very basic thing to do, to protect humanity from the wrongdoings of the technologies. And this is probably what is getting also in the headlines more easily. But when you think about the kind of things that AI can do, remember that it took us 1 year to develop the COVID vaccine, which was, compared to historical standards, it takes 8 years. Yes, of course, we were cutting steps and we were cutting the checkups that are usually mandatory for the development of these technologies, but 1 year. And it was because AI was used. International cooperation was very strong because data was being shared, because understanding of the virus was being shared, is what's 1 year. But the other question of the protein unfolding, that it was AlphaFold who developed how the protein was related. And this is just the most impressive promise that we have in the health sector, to understand the difficulties, the problems, but also to see how we can develop treatments that can improve the well-being of people. One of the sectors that is the most impacted positively is the medical diagnostic and teleconsult. Imagine Indonesia with the 1,000 islands that you have to bring services to communities that is so difficult. Now you have these possibilities really, because the doctors will introduce the symptoms and the things that you can tell them, and they will probably get it right with the technologies to help advance cures. And the personalized learning, and this is also the Deputy Minister, something that you're looking very closely into it. How do we support teachers? How do we support students? How do we personalize it? The problem with the education systems is that it's so difficult to identify the very specific needs and target to the very specific needs of every single student. This is impossible. But now it can be also done thanks to the technology. Climate and agriculture, the question of open source, that is, I would say that is one of the very good news, because it's allowing also to democratize these technologies. And of course the benefits in terms of productivity and growth. Although I have to say that the question of open source is also has two sides: the democratizing the use, but also the wrongly use that can also be dramatic. Good news is that the cost of AI is becoming accessible. The tokens, the inputs that you need to develop your own models is cheaper, and that's why it's also more promising that we are not going to be competing with OpenAI, and I hope that Indonesia will also do that, that you will have a large language model for Indonesia. But at the end, it doesn't matter, because small models with the kind of instruments that we have now can be good enough to address so many issues. And look at the cost of how much open source has declined, the cost of inputs to use this technology. The public sector has also been doing very important investments, and research and innovation is also taking up. So this is one of the good news. Now we have the bad news. And these are probably the ones that worries us more, and that also puts a very important question to governments. Because at the end, when I see that it was Mr. Amodei who decided not to launch Mythos last week, this huge breakthrough that actually can identify the vulnerabilities of all the systems. And that was the purpose of the methods, to help everybody to check the vulnerabilities on the financial sector, in the health sector, in all of these areas. But they discovered that by this system recognizing these vulnerabilities, it can also attack them. And therefore, it was for Amodei, Mr. Amodei, who I don't know, I mean, he's a very smart guy, very nice guy. Your husband worked with him, but is he the one that needs to decide what gets into the market? Is he an elected individual that we put these kind of decisions in his hand? I don't think we are really in the right place when a few group of very smart people are in charge of deciding the fate of humanity. And therefore, I feel that this is very important that we look at the dangers and that we try to develop the elements to ensure that we control them. And you have them here. AI matches expert performance on bioweapons benchmarks, and therefore it can be used. As it can be used for good, it can be really used for massive wrongdoings. Mass surveillance, which undermines civil liberties at scale. And I think this is an issue that has been there since the very beginning of AI. The question of data usage, the question of abuse of your information, the question of harms to privacy, the manipulation, because many times it's not only about your personal data, it's about your emotions. It's about neurotechnology combined, neural data combined with AI that can immediately put you in certain corners, and no surprise, whenever you are caring about animals, you will be inundated with images of animals. If you're caring about health, and for good and for bad. So I think that this is one of the issues that we have not really addressed as it should. And now we are seeing also whenever there are democratic processes, the manipulation that can be used. Systemic disruptions, jobs, privacy, environment, and power. Jobs is one thing that I will talk, because this is one of the most direct impact that it's having, and also related to the education system. Models detecting evaluation, and this is interesting because then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that we think about these technologies as if they were living beings, no? Because you have seen the testing analysis that have come from the labs, that the technology respond one thing whenever you are testing whether the limits of what the rules that you put in the systems is respected or not. And when you release the system, they do something else. And therefore it seems that they are trying to escape, no? There was this very famous episode, I think it was with OpenAI, where they discovered that the model was trying to avoid being shut down, and therefore was developing rules to avoid for the human to shut it off. So it's just, it looks like a cyber fiction, but it's real. For my taste, one of the most important elements that we need to address is addiction in the population, everywhere. Adults, as I said, using it as a therapist, people that cannot move one step without asking ChatGPT what to do. But if that's difficult for the whole population, for the young people, for children whose brain is just being developed, is really a very important element. And I was very pleased to find that the US court found that Meta and TikTok and YouTube liable for something that is very interesting, because one problem is that the US does not hold platform accountable for their content. This is in the US law, and it's very difficult to address because it has to do with freedom of speech. For my taste, they should be accountable as any newspaper, but they are not. What happened with this trial is that the people that promoted it were not looking at the content. They were looking at the design of the system that created this addiction. And I think this is a real breakthrough, because then you will be attacking the question of the design. And this is what we really need to do. And then the deepening inequalities within and between countries, because please, let's just remember that 1/3 of the world population don't even have access to internet. And so we think that it's everywhere, but it's not. And please, if I take longer, I need to finish. No, I still have a little bit more time. Okay. the question that I wanted also to dip the power in very, very few hands. 90% of AI models are coming from the industry, and this is up from 60% in 2023. Very important for research institutions to try to get into that ecosystem. Because it cannot be that only the labs are producing the models, and not only the models, also 90% of the research is being done by commercial labs. And it's fine, but it cannot be like that. We really need to counterbalance, invest more in research that is for good in universities. 10 labs, and usually linked to this industry, produce 80% of frontier models globally, and as I told you, 4 trillion NVIDIA market cap 2025 is just huge. And for developing countries, the problem is that we will be just takers of the technologies as they are. Whether they are biased because they are produced in a language. Language is not only a tool, it's a mind frame, it's a mindset, it's prioritizing certain issues, and therefore we are just lagging behind. If we don't take into account the local context and values, indigenous language and cultural features might be lost. 1/3, as I said, of global population still lacks sustainable internet access. And the other part is that these technologies mirror our cultures, but if it is only developed by one predominant culture, then we might need to be putting more emphasis in these issues. And then the geopolitical race. And this is very important because the geopolitical race is really pushing the regulatory aspects and the policy aspects to the backseat. Because it's more important to compete, it's more important to go to the market, it's more important to be number one. The race to have general AI or super intelligence, meaning technologies that can do everything that we humans do in a cognitive field, is just there. And therefore this race is just avoiding any kind of consideration for impact and for negative outcomes. The question of jobs, and this is very important, because if you see the headlines, 170 million jobs will be created. Right now we have the prompt engineering, didn't exist before. The kind of data analyst didn't exist before. So many jobs are just being created with the technologies. 92 million jobs displacement by, we are having this analysis by 2030 on a foresight work that we did. And therefore, if you just do the headlines, 78 million net new jobs will be created. And this tells you that the transition is difficult and disruptive, but at the end, it might be positive because the jobs are being created and maybe we will have access to them. Problem is that one thing is to say we will have this amount of jobs in the near term. Another thing is to say, how do we organize the skills that we have in the market, the specializations that we have in the market, to accompany the person that is the one that is going to be experiencing the change in their jobs to take advantage to these other jobs. Just think about the programmers, the coders. The coders were like the jewel of the crown in our universities and our markets. Now we don't need coders anymore because you can code. You can just go and ask the computer to transform one of your problems and they develop the codes for you to use them. And therefore now there is a drop, massive drop to engineers that will relate it to code. And this is not just that, is that tomorrow will be something else. And that will be the lawyers and maybe the courts and and therefore we need to be accompanying, and this is one of the areas where I feel governments need to really upscale the capacities to produce the programs to accompany people in the transition, because that's where we really need to move. So what we have now is a governance gap. And the governance gap is that the ecosystem as we know it is really looking at profit maximization, is looking at your political consideration, is looking at the speed and scale. And as I said, rush to the market, you put the product in the market, and then you decide whether there are things that you need to arrange. Closed AI ecosystems, and policies and regulations that are put in the back. And this is completely turning upside down the way we used to produce policies before. Because in any other sector, pharma, automobiles, chemicals, you don't rush to the market. You have a lot of compliance mechanisms before the product is released. And I was impressed. You remember when President Biden launched his executive order, he came out and said something that I was like, well, that's like 101, because he said, I feel that we need to evaluate the systems in their impact before they are released. And it's like we found the Holy Grail, but that's what we do with all the sectors. We evaluate the products before they reach the market. And we are not doing that, so I think it's very important. What is needed, as we did in UNESCO's recommendation, putting human rights, human dignity, fairness, and sustainability as a foundation, not looking at the capacities of the technologies only, but looking at how do we ensure that human rights are respected when the outcomes reach us. International cooperation, institutional capacity, solid policy frameworks, and inclusive developments. And look at Indonesia. When we did the RAM, the hidden vulnerabilities in a nation of 700 languages and high climate risk, ignoring biases and environmental is a misalignment, a massive misalignment. This is the survey that people in Indonesia express what were their most, the things that worry them more of these technologies not being framed rightly. And you can see that human cognition, what is the impact? What is the impact of our kids using ChatGPT? What is the impact of us using ChatGPT? And ChatGPT usually is the tool that you can ask to synthesize, to organize, to structure. I want to write a paper with this, make the structure. And this is a very important cognitive function for our brains and for the students. And this might be lost. Incorrectness, that means use of AI, violation of rights and privacy, safety and security. So you have all of the elements there, as I said, inequality, economic and social, cultural, and bias. The good thing is that, of course, we are getting more and more aware of all these things. What we did at UNESCO, I feel, was really ahead of our time. And because of that, we were highly criticized, because everybody was saying, why do we need ethics? I mean, we're talking about serious things. Don't come with this very nice philosophical thing. I don't know whether it's not philosophical, because at the end, ethics has been the foundation of our laws and of the way the societies operate. If not, we will be in the Wild West. And I was very pleased, because it was really trying to change the conversation and say, okay, if you have technology that is going to discriminate, thousands of millions of decisions are being taken on the basis of these technologies. Financial sectors are deciding whether they allocate a loan or not. Education systems are also going through the applications using these technologies. Having an interview in a job position, the same. And therefore, we need to worry about how these things are built, and whether, because I am a woman from Mexico, have 100,000 less chances to even be considered for anything, because the algorithm considers that I'm not worth having any opportunity. So I feel that this is the kind of things that we were looking in terms of the outcomes. And the conversation was about outcomes, because it's true that whenever you talk to the big tech, they are a little bit arrogant, because they're very powerful and very smart. And then they will tell you, you are going to regulate us? Do you have a clue about these technologies? What are you talking about? And I'm saying, no, we're not going to go to see how you're doing the recipe. What we're going to do is that if there is harm, the duty of care is with the government. And if my young daughter commits suicide, somebody needs to be accountable. And therefore it's the outcome base. And if you think about it, think about restaurants. We never go to the chef to see how he's cooking and what is he putting in the sauce. Never, because it might be also proprietary. But if the restaurant has somebody that gets ill because of the food, there is a norm and there are ways to address it. And therefore it's not as difficult as that. But I feel it was the push to do it more outcome-based, to look at fairness and inclusiveness, to look at the rule of law and accountability. And I was commenting with the founder of the center before, the question of how do we translate the rules that we have now in our stocks? Think about property rights. Every day there is jurisprudence about property rights. Who is the owner of a creative development? And there are rules that are already established there in terms of percentage, in terms of content, in terms of et cetera, et cetera. Those rules are being extended for AI. We need to do the same everywhere. But the most important part is the liability regimes and the sanctioning whenever something goes wrong that allow us to go back and say who is responsible. This is really important. And the transparency and proportionality. Again, there is always a trade-off because these are proprietary systems, because there are closed door, because there is IPR. But at the end, if there is harm, and the recommendation established, and this was very good, that we are not going to be just looking at every single development. But whenever the authority considers that something needs to be done, it will be done. And you have other sectors like the tax transparency. You don't pursue everybody for their tax statements, but you do if you think that there is something wrong. So this was the beauty of the recommendation. We did the RAM of Indonesia, looking at all of the elements, because it was not only about whether you use the technology or don't use the technology, whether you are prepared for the technology or not. The whole narrative is that the technology is going to change the way we work. It's going to change the way we study. It's going to change the way we interact with each other. And therefore, how do we prepare really upscaling our own capacities? And I think that this is the most important element. And you have here the National Strategy of AI, which was really very, very well developed, looking at infrastructure and data, but also talent, industrial research, and all of the priorities: health, government, education, food, and mobility, and smart cities. And then the final element that I wanted to bring here, because it was part of the issues that we look into it. We wanted to change the conversation, and I feel that this is happening now because it's recognized that the technologies are super fast, super smart, super powerful. We need to have institutions that are super fast, super powerful, and that also can create another kind of outcomes. We need to look at the institutions. Let me tell you, when we do the ramps of these 80 countries, in many countries we arrive and we ask, who is in charge of AI? Who is in charge in Indonesia of AI? Nobody is in charge. Everybody is in charge. Each one of you is in charge. The Ministry of Education has a very powerful mandate to do AI for education. The Minister of Labor, the Minister, but you don't have an overarching structure that will help to bring this coherence that is important to ensure that there is somebody that is really watching. We work with the European Union, and the European Union institutionally is one of the most advanced because of AI Acts. But again, when they started to implement the AI Acts, they said, who is in charge in the government? And so we started creating supervisory agencies to look in a holistic manner whenever something goes wrong, looking at sandboxes, looking at digital public infrastructure, what are the frameworks of international cooperation, but more than anything, the government capacity to understand and audit AI. This needs massive investments. There's no time to lose. Because of course, if you are investing $230 billion just in the US to develop the new edition of AI, our governments would need to be investing massively in the capacities of public officials, of systems, of to just ensure that we rebalance a little bit this issue. The question of incentives is also very important. As I said, the ecosystem as it is now is, again, geopolitical competition, profit-making, rush to the market, who's going to be the first to deliver on general AI, and I feel we need to change that. And there are tools that we have. The procurement systems can ensure that no platform is contracted if they don't have certain criteria for security, for safety, for human rights. The question of liability regimes, there's nothing more powerful than a good sanction at the right moment. Because that's why it's so important, this court outcome with the design of the social networks, because it really creates changes in the market actors. Defining no-go zones, for me this is just so simple. Why don't we have, in the production of the massive amount of information we receive created with AI, a watermark informing you that what you're seeing is AI created? It's just as simple as that. Why don't we forbid deepfakes? It only needs to be said and done. It's forbidden. And you can use it, you can develop them, but you cannot just release things of an actor, of a person that does not agree you to do that. One thing actually that we were also commenting in terms of policy, China has decided, and this is very important, that it's very sad that we have this geopolitical system that does not allow us to learn from each other when things are doing good in one country or in another. But they just put a law that people has the right to opt in to be in the data to be trained. Opt in. It's a huge difference from what we're doing in the Western countries, which is to opt out. You can say, I don't want to be in your data set. But then it's you who needs to go and define whether you are or not, or use or not. Well, at the end, it should be the other way around. And this can change the incentives in the way these things are doing. Mandatory auditing. As I said, we're not going to be rushing to see how the technologies are being done. But as they do, the government many times says, okay, I'm going to take a look at this tax contributor, this one, just by chance. And then if they find something, it goes to be pursued. If not, they leave it alone. These kind of things are rules that we have in every other sector. I think that we should just do that. And the ex-ante evaluation, proactive safety standards, the famous red teamings that is very well known. And now we have a lot of technologies that are actually helpful to use these things. I myself, I'm going to launch an LLM that is going to be trained in values, and its name is Angelic. So we're very excited because it's not only about the rules, but also to have the technologies that can help us produce better respondent. And then the final element, the investments. It's super important that we focus on investment. The international institutions should have a huge fund in the very same way that we have the climate fund, that we have the vaccine fund. We need investments, massive investment in compute, massive investment in literacy, in the open source models, small models that can help us address certain issues, gender responsive progress, because you think that these technologies are just reproducing the state of the world in so many ways. Well, they're just also exponentially making more difficult for women to get gender equality. Because we are not represented in the data, because we have 22% of the workforce is made by women, because of course we are the ones that are more targeted when there is cyberbullying, and there are less girls going to ICT than they go to STEM. And therefore, I'm also happy that in the recommendation we included the gender responsive agenda, and then invest massive, massive, massive in national R&D. I'm sure that we're going to hear by the Deputy Minister, but it's really important that we go for our own research. So this is the conclusion. The future of AI is a human choice. It's not predetermined. It's not that some nice lab in Silicon Valley is going to determine it. It's for us. We have the agency. We have the tools. We have centers like this fantastic place to think about ahead of time, and I'm sure that we can turn it around. So I'm very grateful to be here with you, and I was gonna say, here I am. So we can connect whenever you want to continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ramos. We ask that you please stay on the stage and sit on the sofa to transition into the next panel session. It was a very insightful presentation, and we hope that this can become a good basis for the discussion in the panel. Now it is my honor to invite Professor Djisman Simandjuntak to the stage to begin the moderated session. As a background, Professor Simandjuntak is the chair of the Board of Directors at the CSIS Indonesia Foundation and previously served as rector at Prasetya Mulia University with a background in economics. Please, Pak Djisman.
Thank you. Let me first honestly introduce myself. I'm an economist by training. And
Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's perfect, yeah, you are right. And in our endeavor, we are very much guided by the principles of efficiency, which is pursued by OpenAI and led to the leaving of Amodei and friends to establish Anthropic. But we also try to adjust ourselves to new realities, I mean economies. And this AI technology is one of the areas in which I think economists also have started to think aloud. And the problem is this. We are here now, but the baby is almost adolescent, almost mature, with OpenAI, Anthropic, and now comes current AI, and we started to dwell on these very important issues, in fact, existential issues for us as human beings and humanity. Issues of liability, issues of fairness, issues of transparency, issues of accountability, which we would have required from the beginning. But here we are. We have the big tech companies over there and attempts on our side to impose the existential regulations and guidance so that this technology also can serve us, humanity. 66 years ago, Nick Lida introduced the idea of human-man-computer symbiosis. So it should be symbiosis. And the idea was to assign the routine things to computer, to machines, and the creative things to human. But I think given times, AI also will reach the stage of being, I don't know, super intelligent. Imagine if you give AI 100 years to evolve, 1,000 years, and this, our brain needs 500 million years to evolve to get to the current state. So I think it's very pertinent that we address these very existential issues and For the discussion, I would like to invite first Ibu Stella Christie to share with us her way of looking at these things, to enrich the materials for our discussion later on. I should introduce her properly. Ms. Stella Christie is an academic, a cognitive scientist. It means a lot nowadays, being a cognitive scientist. Currently serving as Vice Minister of Higher Education, Science and Technology in Indonesia. She has 4,000 universities under her auspices. 4,000 universities. She holds a bachelor's degree from Harvard University and a PhD in cognitive psychology from Northwestern University. In addition to a role in government, she is a professor at Tsinghua University in Beijing, where she also serves as research chair at the Tsinghua Laboratory of Brain. I don't know whether AI will come to the states of very similar to our brain one day. She also serves as a researcher at Tsinghua Laboratory of Brain and Intelligence and director of Child Cognition Center. Child Cognition Center. We should have discussed these issues when I was still a very little child. Stella is a member of the governing board of the Cognitive Science Society and a science and education advisor to the Indonesian government. Her research is very interesting, among others on relations, how relations evolve, relations of a child with a mother, a child with a child, etc. So without further ado, let me give maybe 15 minutes, Ibu Stella, for you to share your view on this. I'm sure audience will benefit a great deal from that sharing. Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. A good morning to you all. I'm very happy to be here because there are so many friends, ambassadors, obviously, Pak Yusuf, Pak Djisman is a good friend as well. And in fact, when I was still a scientist, before I became a vice minister, I already went in on his invitation went to his university when he was still a rector to talk about AI. So very glad to be here, and Gabriela, was really great to have you to come to Indonesia, and thank you for the insightful lecture. I wasn't planning to give lectures or anything, although I have many, so there is prepared, but I think maybe it's a bit more interesting to give a couple of things, and I'm sure I think we're going to have a conversation, right? But in the spirit of not yet, let's not show this. But in the spirit of introducing self, perhaps I'll say a few things that might be relevant and interesting. The first, as a cognitive scientist and the head of Tsinghua Laboratory of Brain and Intelligence, and also the founder of Child Cognition Center. You may be thinking that Child Cognition Center is about children. It is and it is not, actually. The question is not about children, it's not about child development. So maybe people think that I do child development. Not really. What I do is I try to understand the origins of intelligence. And so in my day-to-day job as a scientist, I still do them, is I try to understand where does intelligence come from. So in my research, my lab is the largest cognitive development center in China, one of the largest in Asia. And our research always involves three subsections. very young children, babies, animals, so non-human primates. So we actually have monkeys and non-human primates in our laboratory. We have a really big monkey laboratory, and artificial intelligence. So we test on the same task on all the three systems, and we compare how the three systems actually do in the same task. You know, in 2018, the journal Science, just to show this, actually has a really big effort to look at how, and there is a video about this, how to train AI to learn like a child. And the idea, and still ongoing, is to understand how to make AI to really learn like a child. This is still an effort today, although it's eclipsed by all the conversations for much. And Prof. Djisman just said that we don't know whether AI will be like our brain someday. The answer I can tell you that it will be and it will not be, ever. We already now know that that even the generative AI is not like our brain. That artificial intelligence, it's still the rule of the game in artificial intelligence is that the bigger the data, the better is your outcome. That is not how our brain works. That is not how our brain works. You all know that 3-year-olds who grow up in any countries can speak the language, whatever that language is. You know, we're all very proud to say that, you know, perhaps Arabic is the most difficult language or Chinese is the most difficult language. Well, from the brain's perspective, nothing is more difficult than the other in terms of language, because a 3-year-old everywhere in the world have mastered their native language without being taught. And the current AI, you can feed the current AI with 10 times, 20 times of the input and the data to the AI, and they still are not going to learn as well in terms of language as well as the human child. It's not only in language, it's everything. You know, a 3-year-old will never mistake glass with something that is not a glass. AI still mistakes that. Still have mistakes. That's why you still have those CAPTCHA, luckily. It gets more and harder and harder. You still have, you have to click which one is the, complete the puzzle, or click which one is the motorcycle, which one is the bicycle. A 3-year-old will never make that mistakes. And the AI, which have had millions of bicycles fed into them, still make that mistake. So object categories are still. So this differential between making an abstraction based on the number of data is different between the human brain and the artificial intelligence. This is a very, very important note when we're thinking about the ethics of AI, because if we think about what really when we say what really is humanity, we need to really look at how humanity functions. And these things that we are able to make an abstraction, we are able to understand concepts from very small amount of data. This is something that we should not lose. This is something that we should actually not lose in our education, in our day-to-day conversation. And something that we should guard, because this is our advantage over artificial intelligence. And I feel this is not hype enough. So that's the first thing about me. The second thing that is also relevant to the conversation, we hear a lot about Anthropic and OpenAI. I actually happen to have a personal connection. Anthropic was founded by 4 people: Amodei, his sister, Jared Kaplan, and Sam McCandlish. And one of these people is my husband's student. So the co-founder of Anthropic and the current CTO of Anthropic is my husband's student. And this is not to brag. This is to share an interesting thing, which is that the 4 of them were in OpenAI, and they left OpenAI as a protest. And we are very proud of what Anthropic, of course, there's always issue, but we're very proud that of this appendix issue, that they rejected to on the basis of ethical issues that the Defense Department of the United States should not be using their things. And there is something to be said that the 3 out of 4 of them are all researchers. They are all scientists. And in science, we are led by integrity. We have ethics. We want to do things that are good for humanity. And maybe that is what really still remains in these founders of Anthropic, that base their decisions not only on financial reward alone, but there's something ethical about what we do. And I want to say this to encourage, because in Indonesia, there is so much doubt about making people to want to do science. It's hype, but it is not. In the public, if you do a survey right now, everybody thinks in Indonesia that a lot of people, not everybody of course, but a lot of people think that doing research, publishing papers, those are just going to end up in the dust. And everyone and a lot of people think that doing research, trying to do innovation, that's not going to have a direct impact and direct use to the society. And I never tire to say that once, not a single one of you will be able to use GPS if Albert Einstein was thinking about what is the market need right now. GPS comes from a theoretical understanding, a curiosity to want to know how the world works. It doesn't come from like, how should we navigate with GPS? But without Einstein's theory of relativity, we will not have GPS. The same thing with artificial intelligence. It does not come with a need. The first one who asked this in the philosophy, it was published in the philosophy of mind, was the questions, can machines think? Mathematician. Yes. And so there is much to be said about still educating oneself about how to think, about how to contribute to the humanity of the new knowledge that we can do. And that is first and foremost is the job of everyone who is in higher education. And I think we need to really go back to that. And ethics, unfortunately, sometimes if we talk about ethics, we sort of divide between ethics and economics, okay? And this is a problem. It is not the case. In another part of my life as a scientist, as a cognitive scientist, we also research a lot about behavioral economics. And one of a very good mentor of mine and very good close friends, Professor Barry Schwartz, is the one who comes out with the idea of the paradox of choice. And one of his theses, and it's proven again and again, is that when a company actually has a higher goal, they actually make their people to actually works in a much more efficient way. There's a lot of data and there's a lot of research about this. So I think we have to have a lot of conversations about a lot of thinking about the AI and the AI and the ethics, ethics and as well as the economics. I don't think they are differential things. The third point that I want to make is I am actually going to use my slide. So if you can show the slide. I think we have heard that AI carries a lot of risks. And often when I talk about AI carries a lot of risk, I gave this talk actually in one of the world biggest conference in Shanghai. Jeff Hinton was there, and this is one that I want to talk about. The first one is AI carries a lot of risks, and if we look at this risk, we can see it in 4 dimensions. The first one is about employment. The second one is about security, and the third one is about reliability. These are 2 different things, security and reliability. Security is about the internet itself, how secure they are. Reliability is about deepfake, about what kind of information's in. And the fourth one is about inequality, that there is inequality between developed countries and developing countries, between US and China versus the rest of the world, between developed communities and less developed communities, between those who actually create the AI and those who just simply use them. So there are a lot of inequality. But interestingly, and this is my point, is that, I don't think this works, okay, sorry. Interestingly, those same dimensions, AI is the very answer to that, or at least it could be the answer. AI is an enabler. So when AI, make you lose jobs, it also creates jobs. I think Gabriela just showed the numbers just now. AI actually can also detect threats more accurately. So you can actually use the internet security better with AI. AI can also be fact checkers. So in terms of information reliability, you can also use AI for that. And when there is inequality, AI can be that equalizer in education that is very clearly shown. And this is what I think is interesting, is that we do not talk about this, and we do not often. It's about space and time. When we look at the bad and the goods of AI, and they are exactly of the same dimensions. It's two sides of the same coin, but the time scale is different. The time scale is different. So the bad stuff or the threats are now. You're already seeing the threats right now. And the thing is, if you let it be for a while, you will get the good stuff. But the good stuff are not just going to come right now in a near term and a medium term. The good stuff only will come by itself in a long term. You might have a lot more fact checkers, you might have grand equalizer. And this is, again, to support Gabriela's point, is that this is why the intervention has to come now. Because you can do all these interventions, you can have AI to actually give you the benefits. This is very true, a lot of it. But those benefits, led by themselves, they will only come in a long term. And when it comes in a long term, we might already have too much damage. And that's why the intervention must come now, and must really understand, and must actually, I really like the last one, govern AI and governed with AI. And that is the same point that I have here. What's interesting is it's exactly the same dimension. AI is a threat, but also can be the solver. And it is up to us whether we actually want to use the AI as a solver. While I think we think about all the governance, it's very difficult to, one thing that I learned being in a government right now is that it's very difficult to forbid people to do anything. Okay, you forbid people doing one thing, they will find another way to do it in a different way, right? So we have to be realistic and pragmatic being in a government. And that's why I think, first, you really need to recognize what are the challenges, and to recognize that the same challenges can be answered with the same tool if you are smart about it and if you're actually doing the right kind of intervention. So this is my point. The very last point about Indonesia is this. We have a gap. It is not an easy matter to catch this gap. I think when we talk about talents, when we talk about building institutions, I agree with all those, Gabriela. But the challenge is the gap is so huge. We think about, if we look at the numbers of papers, the innovations that are, I actually, in the same talk, but I'm not going to show you the graph, but in another talk, if we look at the disparities of who produces innovations in AI, who produces papers in AI, it's just so huge between US and China and the rest of the world, let alone in Indonesia. So the question here is that how do we bridge this gap within this time that is also our challenge, right? And it is not just the one thing that I actually would like to really encourage us to think about, I don't think that the answer is that we have to do everything. I don't think that's the way. Because when we do that economically, then we will use our limited budget to spread out into small, small little things into many different pots. We are never going to make it. Never. So, the most important thing is actually the investment on the talent, on the human development, on the human talent. And on that human talent, we must really pick a few areas. What are the niche areas that Indonesia can actually invest on and be really good at it? We cannot be good in every areas. And you've seen the kind of investment that China is like trying to catch up, but even that is still far away. And I've been in both systems. I spent 16 years in the United States and 7 years in China. I know both systems. And so we have to really strategize what is that niche area that Indonesia can invest on. And one thing that I think really is missing in Indonesia right now is that we do not ask, what does Indonesia need AI to give us? We keep talking about AI in Indonesia. We have a lot of hypes about AI. Let's use AI in education. I don't even think that is actually the most important thing. I mean, I know this is shocking, but I really believe that the data shows that it is not the most crucial thing to give AI, to teach children about how to use AI. Absolutely not, ladies and gentlemen. Young children will be able to use AI. First of all, the AI will change next month. In 2 years, they will change. It is a wrong investment if you're teaching children in primary school how to use AI. Absolutely the wrong investment. You should teach the teachers how to use AI, but not the students. That would be a wrong investment. But above all these, Indonesia has not said sharply what is the question that we want AI to answer and to give it to us in terms of economic values. If I break down what is AI, it's this, ladies and gentlemen. AI is a tool that you can use when you look for needles in the haystack. When there are so many things and you have to look for that answer amongst really a lot of things, it's very difficult manually to do it, that's when you use AI. So what is that question of that Indonesia needs to put that the AI will be useful for Indonesia? Let's start with that. That's really what's the most important thing. Once we do that, once we define that question, and that question truly is a question that should be answered by AI, then we can say, let's have an investment in the human capital, have open sources to answer that very question. Let's build institutions to answer that very question. And that investment is going to be a targeted investment that will really try for us to catch up. So I hope we have more conversations to define how to make AI useful for Indonesia and not the other way around, not just Indonesia feeding data to the AI companies. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Ibu Stella. Very well said about the capacity building. Nothing will happen without it. Though, of course, there are complementary investments also that need to be undertaken. Once again, thank you very much to Gabriela. Very insightful presentation. Very, I would say, still in time. And also to Ibu Stella. Before going to floor discussion, maybe there are 4 groups of issues that we may be able to address today. Number 1 is competition in the AI. Right now, the AI industry is kind of structured like a Goliath industry, very big system. but I think it's time to think about distributed AI. AI pursued in local governments, in smaller enterprises, etc. And I think we are not late yet when it's come to that. Number two, institutional change. We need to improve our institutional setting, and I think Gabriela's presentation tells us a great deal about the direction to go, but also Ibu Stella's direction on investment. Number three is investment in infrastructure and in human capital. Maybe we may need a kind of targeting here rather than spreading limited resources very thin across all sectors. China, I think, tells us a little about the benefit of concentrating certain resources in certain industries. And number four, catching up. There is always room to catch up. We know that from history. Continental Europe catching up with UK. And now China catching up with the West. And that opportunity will continue to be available. And I think with the right institution and capacity building, positive catching up for Indonesia also is a feasible option. So let me invite discussion from the floor, not limited, of course, to the issues that I just raised, but feel free. And for the benefit of the speakers and the audience, please identify your institution, yourself and your institution, before introducing your intervention. Please, who is going to start? First, from my side, right-hand side, please. You raise your hand? Yes, please.
Igor from OVCU delegation, thank you very much for a very interesting presentations. I have one question on the guided intelligence. I think there is how countries of the Global South can protect themselves from the open source large language models that include some kind of biases in their search engines. And I think specifically vulnerable for this could be countries of Global South that rely on bigger countries, so mentioned China and the US, on their large language models. So just a question on that, and then it is very much also related to disinformation and other challenges. So thank you.
Do you mind to reintroduce yourself, please?
Igor Pronovis, EU delegation. The delegation of European Union. So one of at the forefront of the AI governance with our AI Act. So
thank you.
So thank you.
Maybe next intervention. Far on the back, on my left-hand side.
Good day. My name is Stephanie Pasaribu. I'm a researcher from University of Groningen. I would like to ask a question to Professor Stella. To be honest, I'm completely agreed with your opinion that we need to identify what AI can give to Indonesia in general. But my question is, this is really bothering me actually. In terms of education in Indonesia, how we need to start to answer those questions, despite of the main issues or challenges that we have in terms of educational structure or problems in Indonesia. As we know that we have a lot of inequality, especially in educational governance in Indonesia. For example, I have a child, 10 years old child, and I think it's too many issues that we need to face in educating children, especially. For example, too many homework for children from school, and then there is no work, there is no balance between, less balance between educational tasks and also time to explore and even to questions. There,
can you
from
please
my
make
yes,
it
okay.
concise?
Yes. So my question is how to answer the question that proposed by Professor Stella, despite of the problems in educational governance in Indonesia. That's my main questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I have difficulties in choosing. Maybe someone on the left, on the front side, please.
Okay, thank you. My name is Chris Wibisana. I am an economic journalist at SUAR. My question is for Ms. Ramos. From several interviews that have been conducted so far, the business community in Indonesia tend to scrutinize AI as a productivity measures for their corporation. And the bias is to dehumanize the entry-level jobs. And so they replace and change the entry-level jobs with AI, and the pretext is to increase the productivity. My question is there a third way, the middle path, that we can ensure and we can step on, that we can ensure that the entry-level jobs is not being replaced by AI, certainly, because the informal jobs is growing everywhere, the youth is uncertain, the youth is anxiety is anxious with their future because the entry-level jobs is being replaced. Is there a third way in the regulation that we have to encourage the government so the AI can be moderated not to replace the entry-level jobs? Thank you.
Thank you. Let me request the speakers first to respond. Maybe starting with Gabriela.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this very interesting question. The first one on competition and how do we ensure that that we have more space for that. I feel this is one of those issues that maybe I'm gonna be a little bit provocative, but history helps us to understand. I always think about these companies as natural monopolies. And in economics, I'm also an economist, that's why I say that nobody's perfect. In economics, you know that the one that innovates the first, that produce the networks, that produce investments, and it will be so inefficient that everybody comes like doing all the telephony networks again and then again and again, instead of having just one. What happens is that the economics of these dynamics creates these huge monopolies that at the end become so big that they need to be segmented and they need to be partitioned. And this is exactly what happened with Bell telephony. It became so powerful that it has to be linked. And what happened there, and this is very interesting, I need to just think about on the competition law. What happened with Bell telephony and how that case can be applied in the future, because there is no political will at this very moment, as I said, because of geopolitical reasons, but I'm sure that when somebody sensitive and smart comes to the US government to think about competition policies, it will try to separate the utility part of the company, which is the data, to the service providing issue. This will be a game changer, because at the end, data will be shared, and therefore you will have more service providers that can use and access the data that is being collected. Right now, the model is who can collect data, who can use data, who can train data, and there are only few competitors that can do that. And therefore, I feel that if you change the business model and think about data as the infrastructure that is allowing these companies to provide for the services, and that will become a trust, or it will become a pool that is managed appropriately by the institutions that we need to build up, and then give access to everybody. That will be a game changer, and I hope that competition policy will find its way in the near future to ensure that this happens. Because coming to the question of productivity, we don't find the productivity improvements. There is just this connection between the impressive, innovative world in which we live and the productivity data. And therefore, there needs to be, first, better ways of measuring it, because of course the way we measure is different. But also we need to make sure that the productivity gains are not only in the frontier firms, which are capturing that bit. And even like 7 years ago, we did a report at the OECD that showed how much this high concentration of data, of talent, of infrastructure, of investments. Raise your hand, who has 1 billion to invest? Of course, nobody has 1 billion to invest. It's just huge. But what happens is that these companies are also attracting the best talent, and therefore the competition, not with the developing countries, the competition in that market is completely impossible, because you have the frontier firms that are few, and the rest. We call it the best and the rest. And the distribution or the diffusion machine that is supposed to bring all these innovations to share with many other companies is just not happening because of the data issue, but also because of this concentration of talent. And therefore, the competition and these issues, the productivity, are super important. What is amazing is that we need more research, and I completely agree with you, Deputy Minister. I think that we need to do more research, the institutions, the people, the higher education, because we are not understanding what is happening. When you ask the companies, do you use AI? 95% of the survey companies that we did with Thomson Reuters of 3,000 companies worldwide representative, 95% of the companies were saying, yes, I'm using AI. What are they doing with AI is the question. And what they are doing, they are just giving their workers access to ChatGPT. Thank you very much. With all the questions of privacy, with all the questions of risk for the systems, but that's not investing in productive capacities to change the way the companies operate and to be more productive. That's just giving your worker a tool that might help him do his job better or not. Because at the end, what happens is that the workers that are being surveyed also to share their experience when using ChatGPT, they feel overwhelmed because they're doing more with this tool, but they're not feeling that they are improving in their career perspectives, they're not improving in their own skills, they're just using the thing. And therefore, I feel it's very important that we again regain this agency to decide, how do I want to introduce these technologies in my sector, in my school? I also agree with you, the question of rush to get AI in the classes. Well, that's not the point. The point is, how do we think about the educational content, the educational practices, the teacher's preparation, and whether we use it or not, because it might be better to invest in math professors than investing in having a tool in the school. So I think this is very important. And for the employment part, which I feel is a very challenging one, I would recommend that you read Power and Purpose by Daron Acemoglu. The Nobel Prize, I exchanged a lot with him, because he is of the view that you have the choice whether to have introduced technologies in your businesses to replace workers or to augment workers. It's easier in the short term, again, the slide that Professor Stella showed us, in the short term, you might be bound to say, let's replace. Let's just automate, because it's very easy. Better I have an agent to do my accounting. Better I have an agent to respond to the questions. I don't need this person. And then you see what is happening now in the big technological firms, 10,000 dismissed. No, JP Morgan, 20,000 dismissed, 30,000 dismissed. We know that generative AI has a very special impact on young people because those are the early jobs that can be replaced very fast. Why don't we sit and have a civilized conversation of what are the skills that I have in my company that can be augmented with the technology and that can improve. It will require smarter organizations. It will require for us to make the homework, that is not very easy, to do a skills analysis, knowledge management, and understand how do we strengthen the capacities of the people that I have with the technology. Because I am convinced it's not that the technology is gonna replace humans. Humans that know how to use the technologies are gonna replace humans that don't know how to use the technologies. And therefore, the best investment we can make is to see how do we enhance the capacities of our workers using the technologies, not only giving the ChatGPT, but thinking, and this is very important because there are more and more organizations that are concluding again that it's not about the technology, but it's about the organizational framework in our institutions, in our embassies, in our schools, understanding how it works and where the technology can help us improve it. And in that sense, we also have the option of not using the technologies. And I think this is also very important because we're also, as we have this rush to the market, we also have this rush that we need to use the technologies by all costs. No, maybe not. And this is something I learned because at UNESCO you have all of the cultures represented in the groups that develop the tools and the standards. And I learned so much because in the OECD we were only economists from very advanced economists. Then you go to UNESCO, you have the world there with all the, and you know, there were philosophers, amazing philosophers that help us have this critical thinking that sometimes we might lose. And they were saying, do we need to always use the technology? Or can we just have this reaction to ask ourselves whether we can address the problem without using technology and then see how we can, I think this critical thinking that we are always talking that we need to embed in our workers, in our children, is really important because it's not only the technologies, but how we decide, how we relate to the technologies, and that's our choice.
By the way, it's Daron Acemoglu who introduced the notion of knowledge collapse because we get lazy because of AI. And we forgot how to think. Ibu Stella?
On the first question, I want to underscore Gabriela's about data. And this is even more important for Indonesia. The reason is this. If we break down artificial intelligence, generative AI, basically there are three components: algorithm, data, and computing power. The way that AI works is basically you have to create an algorithm to give an outcome of a certain questions that you might have, and those, whether you ask a questions that right now in ChatGPT, any questions you have to have a particular algorithm. Those algorithms need to be trained on data, and the calculations of those algorithms on the data has to live in a computing power, right? So Indonesia, if you ask, like, what do we have? Do we have the algorithm? We don't. And let's not kid ourselves, we are not going to catch up with these algorithms. So when we talk about the LLM, you're very correct that the LLM, the really big LLM that's really powerful is run by by US and China. And just to give you a sheer sense of it, it's like to train a model of AI, this is going to take like hundreds of millions of dollars, one kind of training. It's difficult for any other country to catch up with that. So it's very difficult for you to catch up on the algorithm. If we talk about computing power, some countries are able to do this, to invest on this. Obviously, UAE is a great example of making investment very wisely and able to do investing on the computing power. That can attract, obviously, the algorithm and the data and all. Indonesia are not yet able to do this. I'm part of the government, but I think it's also very important to be to think about the actual situations so that we can be smart about what we do. So the only thing that we have is data. But ladies and gentlemen, data is the very key. If you have data, you can buy algorithm, you can trade for algorithm, and you can buy for computing power. So what happens in Indonesia, and this is to answer your question, is we are not aware that we have this gold mine of data. We are not having a regulations how we keep our data, how we can actually use our data to buy algorithm, to buy computing power. We are not doing this yet in Indonesia. And so to answer about the Global South, how can we catch up about the competition? The Global South has to really think very seriously about data. And data even starts from very simple things. Let me ask, how many of you in your institutions just put your data in Google Cloud? I bet you, most of you, right? But if you want to keep, but of course that's very high risk. It's abroad, and it's you can access this data very heavily. How many of you in your companies actually train very well the password that your employees actually are using? Is it just like 1, 2, 3, 4 name and birth dates, right? And so Indonesia is one of, actually ASEAN and Indonesia in particular is one of the most targeted cyber attack. And we are not doing enough to think about this cyber attack and to protect our data. So I just really want to underscore, if we want to have a catch up, if we want to sort of try to equalize the game, we have to be smart. It's difficult for us, Indonesia, to equalize the game based on algorithm, based on the computing power, but we have data. We're the 4th largest country in the world. We're the #1 TikTok users in the world. I mean, so much data there. But we need to make regulations as a government to protect this data and to use it smartly and to use it in an economically strategic way to be able to catch up. So that's a very critical bit. And I'm going to jump to the third question to answer the second question. The third question is about, is there a third way? I'm not so thinking about the third way, but I do recommend, indeed, Acemoglu's Power and Purpose. And I'm a failed economist, so I was actually an economics major in Harvard until my 3rd year, and then I changed to brain. So some economics basics I have. But I think let's not think about it the third way, because those first and second way will always be there. I mean, you cannot tell business people to not think about productivity. The productivity is really always going to be there. The interesting question is that whether, and I think that's that, whether in the long run that replacing everybody with AI is really going to bring higher profit and higher productivity in your company rather than equipping the talents in your company with talents that can bring higher profit. So now the question is, what is that talent or what is that capability, sorry, not talent, what is that capability that can bring in higher profit? And I think the one capability that can bring in higher profit is the capability and the ability to be able to evaluate the outcomes of AI. When the AI tells you, okay, we need to redistribute our goods to this and this company, do you have someone in your company to be able to say, is this recommendation from AI something that I trust, something that I believe, or let me actually check it and with a different question. The ability to evaluate any output from AI, that is what actually I think is the holy grail of what enable us to govern, to do business with AI, and not to be governed and not to be business by AI. So this is why I said this is very related to that second questions about education. If you ask me, what is it that we should educating? We should be educating everyone from kindergarten all the way to our college students and to current workers, because education never stops, it's a lifelong learning. Can you evaluate the AI? Can you tell if your students wants to use ChatGPT to write essays? The question that you should ask, if they do that, will they be able to say what kind of essay is a good essay and a bad essay? Okay. There is actually an answer to this, ladies and gentlemen. There was a recent study that was done by researchers at MIT, and they're giving a task of writing essays to college students from Harvard, MIT, and Wellesley. All of them are in Boston. And there are 3 groups. One group was given ChatGPT. They have to write essays for 2 weeks or so, and on various topics. And one of them can use any LLM, ChatGPT, DeepSeek, and the second group can only use a search engine like Google. And the third group can only use their brain. So it's called the brain-only group, not allowed to use search engine. And after 2 weeks, their essays are, the quality of their essays are evaluated by professors at these institutions, Harvard, MIT, and Wellesley. And they're also actually put on a brain scanner to look at their brain activity. And you want to guess who is the worst group? Is the ChatGPT group. Yes. And the best group is the brain-only group. And these are top college students, Harvard students, MIT students, and Wellesley students. And when they're put into intensive using ChatGPT only versus intensive using brain only, the brain only wins. So this is data. It's not my opinion. This is actual data and research. So in education, I think we have to think very seriously about how do we educate that people can evaluate AI. So AI literacy, we see this word, AI literacy, over and over again. But the meaning of AI literacy is not to know AI. That's very easy. My 9-year-old kid use AI all the time. Yesterday he told me, oh, I have a homework to do a PPT. Yeah, he has to do PPT, PowerPoint presentation. And I said, okay, let's do it together. And I said, I already did it. You just have to tell me whether it's good or not. And I said, how did you do it? So easy. I use Taobao. This is an app in China. My son still is in Beijing. I just told Taobao, slide 1, I want this, slide 2, I want this, slide 3, I want this. It makes me worry, but it also makes me feel at least he can tell the AI what does he want in slide 1, slide 2, and slide 3. This requires still some thinking, ladies and gentlemen. So I think it's still a good task from me. And then one thing is interesting is that, and he asked me, how can we evaluate together whether the AI is giving me a good PPT or not? And that is the most crucial thing. That's what we have to do in education. All right. I often ask this question, and I'm going to end with this, if you are able, if somehow I tell you that I can replace the brain of your children or your workers, right, with ChatGPT, will you do that? I never ask about workers, but usually when I ask about children, no one would want to do that. Workers, I don't know, maybe there's some people who want to say yes. But when I ask if you can replace the brain of your children with GPT, will you do that? The answer is almost always no. And this is interesting because, of course, if you replace the brain of your child with ChatGPT, he or she will always get the perfect score. He will have so much knowledge, right? But yet you don't want to do that. And I think it's because you actually, without saying it out loud, realize when you do that, you never go through the process. You only have the content, but you never go through the process of creating that content which will not allow you to be able to evaluate and appreciate. You no longer will be able to appreciate beauty in art. You no longer will be able to evaluate whether this is fake or not fake, correct or incorrect, good or not. So those power, ability to evaluate any outcome from AI, that's what's crucial in our education. And I think we have to think very hard, how do we do in every single lesson that our children are do that? I think the answer is process. You have to go through the process. And you want to evaluate, you want the children to know that they are asked to do the process and not only the outcome. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. We are much more than just a mere intelligence, aren't we? On this side, on the back. Please make it concise, please, so that we can have more interventions from the floor.
My name is Rafa Kaptari. I'm from Blue Path Lab. I have like two short questions.
I was looking.
Like the first one is for Ms. Rosa. Do we need to have a super international body to regulate AI in such fashions of like how do we regulate nuclear affairs with IAEA and health issues with the WHO? And for Professor Stella, as a policymaker, what is your strategy to educate the adults and people in the manpower how to evaluate AI? Because if you want to teach the adolescents and juveniles, we already have an educational framework for that. But how do you? What is your strategy like to educate how to evaluate AI, like people who are already in the workforce? Because it's a very different thing, and we already have like multiple domain use cases and domains on that matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I saw a lady on this side. Please, our lady.
Good afternoon. My name is Dara. I am from PICAT. My question's actually quite short because we're talking about ethics. I was wondering because Indonesia currently is preparing a presidential decree about a roadmap for AI, if I'm not mistaken, and also the use and the development of AI. But there is no mention about the sanction towards this any misuse or misdevelopments in AI in Indonesia, which I think is important because as Vice Minister Stella already mentioned, we already so behind comparing with the US or with China or Western worlds about AI developments. So it is important for developing countries, I think, to strengthen its own political and social ground to protect their citizens against the advancements of AI. Because the reality, we are all the end users of these AI advancements. The evaluation effort that Professor Stella mentioned before, how capable our nation can do that, can operate that, if the government does not have the political will to protect their citizens, including maintaining I think crucial sanctions or legal framework before the technology innovation become too far and uncontrollable. Thank you.
Thank you. In the interest of time, I have to stop here and allow the speakers first to respond to the last two questions raised, and after that, maybe concluding statements from both of them. Bu Stella?
Let me go to the on the first question about what exactly are we doing to train people. If you do it in the three segments, first, I actually do not think that we already have a framework, educational framework that is sufficient for our primary and secondary educations. I don't think so, quite far from it. Second, for the universities, I'm also going to be very pragmatic and economics about this. If we must look at the data about what do employers are actually looking for when they say that they're going to hire people. And when you look at all kinds of the data and the surveys, employers always say that it's not like one particular ability, but they always say critical thinking, time management, being able to, and being able to social relationship with other people. So all these actually, interestingly enough, there is no classes for that. There are no classes for that. In universities, there are no classes for time management. There are no classes for critical thinking. You cannot teach critical thinking on a theoretical basis in a class. However, actually, you get all those when you are participating in a research experience, because you actually have to really think well about how you ask questions, how you systematically answer questions. And this is what we try to really push in a very concrete terms. We try to push, because universities have independence. There are no curriculum for universities. Universities can arrange for themselves what do they want to teach. But what I try to push is that the universities in Indonesia, just like many top universities in the world, is to actually give credit both to the students and to the faculty members when they are doing research experience. This counts as a class credit. This hasn't been done much in Indonesia, and this is actually a very concrete thing that is done a lot. And so students at Tsinghua University or at Harvard University, we got credits. It counts as a class when we do research experience. And those really teach us about how to think critically, because you answer new questions. You have to work with your faculty members to do this in order to answer the question systematically. And this allows you to have like time management and critical thinking. So we try to push research experience, research mindset in the universities just by one concrete thing. Well, there are many things. We, of course, increased the grant for research. We changed the policy for research a lot, but that's going to be another 1 hour if I talk about it. But what I want to say particularly, we push so that universities actually award credits, both for the faculty members and for the students when they do research experience. That counts as class credits. The third one is about people who are already on the workforce. I want to be clear that this, if anything that we have to do in terms of training, AI training, these are the people that we have to do. We have to give the AI training to. These are because as you see in the timeline that I showed before, they will be replaced right now. So if we don't give training to them, they will lose jobs. So for them, these are actual trainings. And we have to work with other partners. And here I actually want to give a shout out to UAE. Our charge d'affaires is here. UAE has been offering us to train 10 million coders to Indonesia for free. And an Indonesian government, I think we have to really grab this opportunity and work together with our international partners to really give the training, particularly to people who are currently in the workforce. I think that's very important. On the second question, it's actually a long question and require long answers. I just want to answer very pithily about this. You said that we are only end users. This is true and not true in sense. True that we are only end users, but don't forget, we are a huge number of end users, and end users mean that we hold data. So let's think very seriously about incentives and sanctions about data. How do we keep our data? How do we incentivize people to actually keep their data safely? How incentivize institutions to keep their data safely? This is, I think, what we have to be thinking about. So don't lose hope just because we're end users. End users, as I said, we hold data. And in Indonesia, we hold a huge amount of data, and let's use that very well.
Thank you. And don't forget our biodiversity data, which is huge, and we have done very little on that. Please, Gabriela.
I completely agree. I think that the power that the countries like Indonesia have in terms of the numbers, of the market, of the population, we always don't even realize that we have that power to balance the thing. I completely agree. But let me start with the question of international organization. I feel that will be the ideal, no? To have an institution like the nuclear agency that is bringing countries together to understand the risk and to agree on things, but it's not going to happen anytime soon. It's not going to happen because the US is not engaged in international cooperation as they used to be, and they are the main producers, and therefore we count on their good faith. But we are not absent of guidance, agreements, tools, actions in the international context that is helping to shape the discussion on AI and is helping to support the countries that are less exposed or aware on the issues to really think better their strategies. And I have to say that there is no publicity, but I feel that what we did at UNESCO to really go country by country, 80 countries around the world made the readiness assessment, which means it's very nice to have a global standard because it organizes the thinking, and organizing the thinking is a good thing, no? It's good that we bring the conversation on the human rights perspective and ensuring that anything that happens in the technology, or for the matter in any sector, does not impinge on the human rights framework. I think that was one of the great breakthroughs of the ethics of AI. But it would not mean anything if we didn't go country by country. And one of the proudest moments I have when I was ADG in the AI Action Summit in France was when the Minister of Cambodia came to see me. I didn't know him because I did not visit Cambodia to do the RAM. It was my local office that did the RAM. But he came to me and he said, I wanted to see you, ADG, because I just want to say thanks. Because thanks to your RAM, or my RAM, he said my RAM, I now know what I need to do. And I was like, wow, if an institution can help the guy who is in charge of doing something about it to organize his thinking and knowing what he wants to do, I think that the service that the international institutions can provide is huge. The Secretary General of the UN has been very active. He launched the Global Digital Compact. I think that's also very important because he came again to reaffirm the fact that this is not a technological discussion, it's a societal one, it's about impacts, it's about how our societies are more divided, more cohesive, more pacific, more violent, all of these questions is what we need to be thinking about the technologies and how to address it, and then to see how do we norm them. We need to know more. And that's why he launched the panel on AI in the very same way that we have the IPCC for climate that produce every 2 years the information for the world and gather actually all the institutions all around the world that are doing research on this to put it together. I feel this is a very important contribution because we even need to understand. I completely agree with you, Deputy Minister. Many times people don't even understand. The owners of companies, they don't even understand how to nurture the skills, how to go about digital literacy. So I think this is a great service. And when he was doing the Global Digital Compact, I was co-chairing a task force with the ITU. We gathered 45 institutions of the UN system to ask them, not in a beauty context, tell me what you're doing on AI, because we are always very prone to say, I'm doing everything, I'm perfect, thank you very much. No, we just asked them, show us where you have impact with your work on AI. And it was impressive, because UNICEF has really shaped many educational discussions regarding how to integrate AI into the classroom safely. they bring some elements. The health organization, World Health Organization, of course they are thinking about how you bring the diagnostic capacity of AI to the hospitals, but how you also train the doctors to use it and not to abuse it. And therefore I feel that every single institution is doing their thing. What is lacking, and I feel this is very important, is how do we go from the what to do to the how to do it. And this is where sometimes the international cooperation falls short. We go, we do agreements, we do statements, we do standards, that's very nice. Now I leave you, country, to do your thing. I feel we really need to go for a typology of what kind of institutions are useful, what kind of policies are useful, what kind of benchmark are useful, and relating to that conversation. The OECD was super good at that because it brought the policymakers, and then you learn from the best. Yeah. And you also learn from the failures, because it's not only the best practices, the worst practices can also help you to understand how to shape the things better. And as I said, how to prepare better the institutions that need to be driving these things. And learning from each other, because for example, the Council of Europe, I think they have 58 members, they are the only one that have a mandatory binding agreement. And of course, the European Union is also very interesting in terms of their own capacities. I have to say that now we have the international summits on AI. It started with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak from the UK. When generative AI came into the market, they got so stressed. And this is, I have to say, we also need to trust that policymakers might be slow, but at some point they will catch up. And when generative AI came into the market, all of the leaders said, sorry, but safety is crucial. Misinformation at scale, cybersecurity at scale, manipulation at scale, deepfakes at scale. And you know what they did? A very interesting institutional innovation, and that's what I say, institutional innovation. They created the Institutes for Safety. And now these institutes for safety, we have one in Japan, one in France, one in the, I hope that we will have institutes for safety in every single country, because safety means different things in different spaces. But what they do is that they come together and they start exchanging on how to deal with these issues, and I feel this is really important. And it comes back with the question, the last question regarding what Indonesia is doing. I feel that we can learn from those that are leading in the thinking on how to address these issues. And these exchanges and this learning can actually bring to what you mentioned, how do we ensure that liabilities are there, and how do we ensure that criminal offenses are also pursued in the digital space. I feel that Spain has been super brave in saying, sorry, but for the digital platforms, if there is harm, there's going to be criminalization of the owners of the platforms. I think that's best practice, and it will become best practice, I'm sure. Now we have more countries prohibiting the use of social networks for the youngsters. That's super important. Prohibiting smart telephones. I don't know if they're very smart, but the telephones in the classroom, very important. We need to socialize. We need to be together. We need to play together. We need to don't lose the kids not doing anything. Yes, they need to be not doing anything. That was part of also being bored, was also part of our growing up. So I feel that these kind of practices are really informing the kind of decision making that we can have. And there is something else. As I said, policymakers, decision makers, catch up. The Mythos Sputnik moment of realizing, and not only that, the question of this spat between Anthropic and the Minister of War, the Secretary of War. You heard that the Secretary of War wanted to use the system that they have with Anthropic for whatever purpose. And then Anthropic said, I'm fine that you use my systems, but you need to recommit that you're not going to use it for mass surveillance of American citizens, which was interesting because they can use it for anybody in the world, but not for American citizens. Thank you very much. I was like, oh, can I be included also? And then not surveilling my data. And the second part was whenever it is used for autonomous weapons, that there is always a human in the loop, somebody that is in charge of the thing. And the Department of War said, you are not going to impose on us your things. In this case, for my taste, and this is my personal opinion, the company was right and the government was wrong. However, in the scheme of things, it's not a company that is going to tell the Department of Defense what to do and how to define national security. So it's very complex. I think that brought a lot of reflections to the policymakers to see how vulnerable and dependent is the government, the most powerful government in the world, from these companies. And now, the fact that Anthropic, and chapeau to them again, decided that they were not going to launch Mythos, so they left the question of geopolitics, they left the question of competition, they left the question of rush to markets, not to release this super powerful system they created, Mythos, to the market. But it was a decision by a company. I mean, just realize this is crazy. Therefore, I feel that more and more we will be learning how to overcome this thing. And I'm sure that the US, who is the key player in the definition of how we rule AI, is going to change the stance. It's going to be looking at these things, and probably they will start thinking about regulations, which for me are, if they are well done, is the best protection that we have to ensure that AI delivers for good.
Thank you, Gabriela. The key word is, I agree, institutional innovations, global level, regional level, national, as well as local. We all have to try to do some innovative works on that. Let me close by saying first, AI, like all other technologies, are dual use. First, we can use it for advancing life, not just humanity, but life. But we can also use it for evil purposes. So ethical judgment is an eternal challenge to all of us. And there is a good side of humanity. I think our human learning is still a better choice than machine learning. Human learning will continue to outcompete machine learning because of the richness of the inputs into the learning. I hope that these very rich discussions introduced by Ms. Gabriela Ramos and Ibu Wakil Menteri Stella Christie will aid us, assist us in navigating safely and successfully the new lives environment, ecosystem, with AI increasingly playing a stronger role in our navigation. Let me invite a very big hand to our...
Can I just say one?
Yes,
one thing?
please.
Thank you. For my fellow Indonesians, I know that
Also
we
what?
talk a lot about catch-up, competition, and we feel that we are very behind. Yes, in terms of the data, in terms of the innovation, in terms of the investment, we are behind. But don't get this wrong. Indonesia has a huge, huge role in the AI governance. We are the 4th largest country in the world. Our people are actually using AI all the time. Those AI cannot work without data. Those AI will be nothing without data. So we also need to have that understanding. I think oftentimes we think that Indonesia is just at the periphery. We are not. And we can make it not to be even more if we choose to do that. When Indonesia make a regulation, that impacts the whole world about how the AI is actually doing this, about doing governance. So let's actually also have confidence. And with that confidence to look at what is it that we have in Indonesia, what are we good at, what we can actually really build, and really we can compete. And not only compete, we have a role in making AI really for the greater good, because Indonesia is a huge part of that greater good. Thank you.
If Indonesia has more and more politicians like Ibu Christie, we will make it. Before thanking the two speakers, I was reminded by Gabriela that we need selfie before we close with all the audience. So please, panitianya mikirin itu. But to close, I think, join me to give a very big hand to our speaker, Ibu Gabriela Ramos. I hope you will return one day to CSIS and to Ibu Christie. Jangan bosan Ibu ke CSIS. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to ask for you to still stay on the stage to take the picture. Our picture will be taken together, and Bapak Yose Rizal Damuri, as the Executive Director, will be giving a souvenir to Ms. Gabriela Ramos and Ibu Wamen Stella Christie.